All right, so for the next problem, we're going to factor negative 2x squared plus 28x plus 30 equals 0. So step one is to make sure that the equation is in standard form, which this one is, ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, so step two is to try to find a GCF. So if I look at negative 2, 28, and then my constant of 30, I can see that those all have something in common. So for this problem, I'm going to take out the GCF of negative 2. Okay, and then what I'm left with, this would cancel, so just x squared minus 14x minus 15 equals 0. Okay, so now comes the split method part. So I'm going to draw my star. I know A times C is going to go up top and B is in the bottom. So when I'm finding these values, A, B, and C, I'm only looking at my new factored form. So A would be 1, B would be negative 14, and C would be negative 15. So negative 15 times 1 would be negative 15. So now I want to come up with two terms that will multiply to be negative 15 and add to be negative 14. So we could use negative 15 and positive 1. Okay, now I want to take these two and I'm going to split negative 14 to be negative 15 and positive 1. So my negative 2 is still out front, and then I've got 1x squared minus 15x plus 1x minus 15 equals 0. Okay, now we need to look for our GCF amongst our terms. So looking at the first two terms, my GCF would just be x. Looking at my next two terms, they don't have anything in common, but we need to remember that we always have to take out a GCF with split method. So if they don't have any other numbers in common, then their greatest common factor would just be 1. Okay, so now I can factor these out of my equation. So I've got negative 2 out front still. And then if I factor out an x, I would be left with just x and then minus 15. Okay, and over here I'm going to factor out a 1. And so I would just be left with the same thing, x minus 15. Okay, so now the last step would be to factor out the x minus 15. So I would have x minus 15, and then I would be left with x plus 1. And this is my factored form. Okay, so now to get the solutions, same as before, I'm going to take both of my factors and set them equal to 0. And then just solve. So here I can add 15 to both sides and I get x equals 15. Over here I can subtract 1 and we get x equals negative 1. And we can always check these answers too. So now what we could do is come back to our original problem, plug in 15, plug in negative 1, and make sure that we get 0 as a solution.